Hair-powerful man runs through the park in search of his missing son. When he finds him, he sees that he is safe beside a strange little girl with sad eyes and torn clothes. Something in her gaze unsettles him, as if she were hiding a secret greater than he could imagine. That night, when he made a simple invitation, he did not know that he was about to change everyone's destiny. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The autumn chill seeped through Emma Reynolds' worn-out jacket as she scurried through Pioneer Square Park in Portland. At just 6 years old, she'd already mastered the art of invisibility, staying small, quiet, and out of sight of police officers and well-meaning strangers who might send her to a place worse than the streets. 3 months had passed since her mother, Sarah's unexpected passing. Emma still carried the weight of that final goodbye in the hospital, her mother's frail hand squeezing hers one last time before the machines went silent. After the funeral, her stepfather Greg had seemed different, distant, irritable, drinking, more than usual. "It's just temporary," he'd mumble when she'd ask about dinner or why the electricity was shut off again. "Your mom handled all this stuff." Then came that confusing afternoon when Greg packed a small bag with Emma's clothes. "We're going for a drive," he'd said, his voice oddly flat. They'd walked to a busy shopping district downtown, and he'd handed her the bag. "Wait right here, I need to get something from that store. I'll be right back." She'd waited 1 hour, 2 hours. As daylight faded, the horrible truth settled in. He wasn't coming back. That first night, Emma had huddled in a store entryway, terrified and crying silently. But children are remarkably adaptable. Within days, she'd figured out where to find food, behind restaurants after closing time, in park trash cans after weekend picnics. She'd discovered safe sleeping spots, the children's reading nook in the public library until closing time, then a hidden alcove near the Riverside Park. She'd learned to wash in public restrooms and to blend in with tourist families when police officers came around. This particular Thursday afternoon, the park was nearly empty, as a light drizzle kept most people indoors. Emma's stomach growled. Painfully, she hadn't eaten since yesterday when she'd found half a sandwich in a lunch cooler someone had forgotten. She scanned the ground beneath the picnic tables, hoping to find a dropped snack or unopened food package. That's when she heard it, the distinct sound of a child crying. Following the sound, she spotted a small boy, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, sitting on a bench near the playground, tears streaming down his face. Emma hesitated. Her survival instinct, honed over these harsh months, warned her to stay away. Getting involved meant visibility. Visibility meant danger. But something about the boy's frightened face triggered a memory, her mother gently wiping away Emma's tears after a nightmare, singing softly until fear subsided. Almost against her will, Emma approached the bench. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice scratchy from disuse. The boy looked up with wide, tear-filled eyes. "I can't find my daddy," he hiccuped. "He was right here and then I saw a squirrel and now he's gone." Emma glanced around nervously. "What's your name?" "Josh," he sniffled. "Joshua Anderson." "I'm Emma." She hesitantly sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "Your dad is probably looking for you right now." Josh's lower lip trembled. "What if he never finds me? What if I have to stay here forever?" The familiar panic in his voice touched something in Emma. She knew that fear, the terror of abandonment, of being utterly alone in an indifferent world. Without thinking, she began to hum a melody her mother had sung countless times, a gentle lullaby about stars guiding the way home. To her surprise, Josh's breathing steadied. He wiped his nose with his sleeve and listened, his crying gradually subsiding to occasional hiccups. "My mom used to sing that," Emma explained softly, "when I was scared." Josh scooted closer. "Where's your mom now?" Emma looked away. "She's gone." "Like my mom," Josh said simply. "Daddy says she's in heaven. I don't remember her much." Before Emma could respond, a man's panicked voice called, "Out, Joshua! Daddy!" The boy jumped up, waving his arms frantically. "I'm here." A tall man with dark hair streaked with premature gray rushed toward them. He scooped Josh into his arms, holding him tightly. "Thank God. I turned around and you were gone. I've been searching everywhere." "I saw a squirrel, Daddy. I just wanted to see if he liked my cookie, but then I couldn't find you." Josh pointed to Emma. "She helped me. She sang a star song." The man finally seemed to notice Emma, who had already begun retreating into the shadows. He studied her with kind but perceptive eyes, taking in her dirty clothes, unwashed hair, and the wariness in her posture. "Thank you for staying with my son," he said gently. "I'm Daniel Anderson." Emma nodded but didn't offer her name. She took another step back. "Wait," Daniel said. "It's getting cold, and it looks like the rain is picking up. Can I buy you both some hot chocolate? There's a cafe right across the street." Emma's instinct screamed to run. Adults couldn't be trusted, but her stomach clenched painfully at the mention of food, and the cold had seeped into her bones. Josh was looking at her expectantly. "They have really good cookies too," Josh added hopefully. After a long moment, Emma nodded almost imperceptibly. The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon and coffee. Daniel ordered hot chocolates topped with whipped cream and a plate of assorted cookies. Emma tried to eat slowly, to savor each bite, but hunger won out. She finished her drink and 3 cookies in minutes. "Would you like more?" Daniel asked without judgment. Emma hesitated, then nodded. As Josh chatted about his kindergarten class and his pet goldfish named Bubble, Daniel observed Emma with increasing concern. Between Josh's stories, he asked gentle questions: where she lived, if her parents were nearby, if someone was waiting for her. Emma's vague answers and averted eyes told him everything he needed to know. When they finished, darkness had fallen outside and the rain had turned into a steady downpour. "Emma," Daniel said her name carefully, having coaxed it from her during their conversation, "do you have somewhere safe and dry to sleep tonight?" She stared at the empty plate, considering lying but somehow knowing this man would see through it. "I'll figure it out," she mumbled. Daniel exchanged a look with Josh, who seemed to understand something significant was happening. "We have a guest room," Josh offered excitedly. "It has a bed with stars on the ceiling that glow in the dark." "Emma," Daniel said softly, "I work as a child counselor at Portland Children's Center. I should really notify social services about your situation. But," he paused, noticing how she tensed at the word social services, "maybe we can figure this out together. Would you consider coming home with us just for tonight? A warm meal, a safe place to sleep? No obligations beyond that." Emma studied his face for signs of deception. Instead, she saw only genuine concern, the same look her mother used to have when Emma was sick or afraid. Against every survival instinct she'd developed, she felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. Hope. "Just for tonight," she whispered. Daniel nodded, not pushing further. "Just for tonight." As they stepped out into the rainy evening, Josh slipped his small hand into Emma's. She flinched at first, then slowly relaxed, allowing this unexpected human connection. Daniel's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. As he unlocked the door, Emma hovered in the hallway, still half expecting a trick, a trap. "Home sweet home," Daniel announced, ushering them inside. The apartment was modestly furnished but undeniably cozy, bookshelves overflowing with colorful titles, a worn leather couch adorned with throw pillows, children's artwork decorating the refrigerator. It smelled of recent cooking and laundry detergent, ordinary homely scents that made Emma's chest ache with longing. "Daddy makes the best spaghetti," Josh informed her solemnly as Daniel headed toward the kitchen. "And we have ice cream for dessert." For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself a small smile. She still didn't know if she could trust this unexpected kindness, but for tonight, just for tonight, she would allow herself to feel safe. As she watched Daniel and Josh move comfortably around their kitchen, she wondered what tomorrow would bring. The practical part of her, the part that had kept her alive on the streets, warned that nothing good lasted forever. But another part, a part she thought had disappeared with her mother, whispered that sometimes, just sometimes, good things could happen even after the worst had already come. Emma woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a disorienting moment, panic seized her chest. Where was she? Then the events of the previous evening flooded back. The boy in the park, his father's kind eyes, the apartment with its warm lights and star-covered ceiling. She'd slept in a real bed for the first time in months, wrapped in clean sheets that smelled of fabric softener. The sensation had been so overwhelming that she'd lain awake for hours, afraid to close her eyes, certain that this comfort would vanish if she dared to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion had claimed her. Now, morning light revealed a modest guest room with pale blue walls. Someone had placed fresh clothes on a chair beside the bed, a child-sized sweatshirt, jeans, and socks, still bearing price tags. Emma touched them hesitantly. New clothes, not hand-me-downs or donations, but brand new. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Emma, are you awake?" Daniel's voice was gentle. "Breakfast is ready. Whenever you—" Darcy, she didn't respond, but he didn't push. She heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway. After changing into the new clothes, which fit perfectly, Emma cautiously opened the door and followed the scent of pancakes and syrup. The kitchen was bright with morning light. Josh sat at the table, enthusiastically drowning his pancakes in maple syrup, while Daniel flipped more at the stove. A colorful array of berries, bananas, and whipped cream was arranged on the table. "Emma!" Josh beamed when he spotted her. "Daddy made pancakes shaped like animals. Mine's a dinosaur, you can have the elephant one." Daniel turned, offering a warm smile. "Good morning. Sleep okay?" Emma nodded, still hovering in the doorway. Part of her expected to be asked to leave now. That daylight had come. That's how kindness usually worked in her experience, brief and conditional. "Come sit." Daniel gestured to a chair that had been pulled up to the table. "There's plenty. Help yourself." The pancakes were delicious, light, fluffy, and indeed, shaped like animals. Emma ate slowly this time, savoring each bite, watching Daniel and Josh's easy morning routine. They chatted about Josh's plans for his kindergarten art project, about the weather forecast, about whether their neighbor's cat would be sitting in the hallway window again. Normal things. Family things. "Emma," Daniel said carefully as they finished eating, "I was thinking maybe you could stay with us for a few days, just until we figure things out." Emma froze, fork midway to her mouth. "Yeah," Josh added excitedly, "we can show you the playground near our house, and the library has story time on Saturdays, and—" "Josh," Daniel interjected gently, "let's give Emma some space to think, okay?" Emma set down her fork, studying Daniel's face for signs of hidden motives. "Why?" she asked simply. Daniel seemed to understand the weight of her question. "Because you need a safe place right now and we have room. Because no child should be alone on the streets, and because—" He glanced at Josh with a smile. "My son hasn't stopped talking about you since yesterday." "I don't have any money," Emma stated flatly. Daniel's expression softened with sadness. "Emma, I'm not asking for money. This isn't a transaction." She looked down at her plate, wrestling with feelings she couldn't name. After a long moment, she nodded once, sharply. "Yay." Josh clapped his hands. "Can we show her the park today, Daddy?" "Maybe later. First, I need to make a few calls." Daniel began clearing the dishes. "Why don't you show Emma your books while I clean up?" Josh eagerly led Emma to a small bookshelf in the living room, pulling out his favorites, stories about dragons, space explorers, and talking animals. As Josh chatted away, Emma could hear Daniel's muffled voice from the kitchen, speaking in serious tones on the phone. "Yes, approximately 6 years old. No identification, appears to have been living on the streets for some time. No signs of abuse, but undernourished." Emma tensed. He was reporting her. She'd heard stories from other street kids about social services, foster homes, institutions where children were locked away and forgotten. When Daniel emerged from the kitchen, she was already at the front door, hand on the knob. "Emma, wait." He approached slowly, hands visible at his sides like someone approaching a frightened animal. "I know you're scared. I had to call my colleague at the children's center. There are legal procedures we have to follow." "You're sending me away," she accused, voice trembling despite her efforts to sound brave. Daniel knelt down to her eye level. "No, I'm trying to find a way for you to stay, legally. If I don't report finding you, we could both get in serious trouble. But my friend Melissa works with cases like yours. She's going to help us navigate this off the record for now." Emma's hand remained on the doorknob. "You promise I don't have to go to a shelter?" "I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you safe," Daniel answered honestly. "Starting with a doctor's appointment this afternoon, just to make sure you're healthy." The pediatrician's office was bright and cheerful, with fish-shaped chairs in the waiting room and underwater murals on the walls. Emma sat rigidly beside Daniel, watching other children play with toys while parents filled out paperwork. "Emma." "Anderson," a nurse called from a doorway. Daniel had temporarily given Emma his last name for the appointment. He'd explained that his health insurance could cover a family emergency visit without too many questions. Emma wasn't sure if she liked borrowing his name or if it felt like erasing her mother somehow. The examination was quick but thorough. Dr. Patel, a woman with a gentle voice and warm hands, checked Emma's height, weight, ears, throat, and reflexes. She noted Emma's underweight condition and signs of minor vitamin deficiencies, but seemed relieved to find no serious health concerns. "You're quite resilient," Dr. Patel told Emma with a smile. "A few weeks of good nutrition and rest should have you feeling much better." As they left the office with a prescription for children's vitamins, Emma felt oddly lighter. The doctor had looked at her, really looked at her, and pronounced her fixable, not broken beyond repair. That afternoon, while Josh napped, Daniel sat with Emma on the living room sofa. "I thought you might want to talk," he said. "About what happened before I met you? It might help me figure out how to help you better." Emma stared at her hands. The new clothes, the doctor's visit, the promise of continued shelter. These things had begun to thaw something frozen inside her. Still, trust came slowly. "My mum got sick," she finally said, voice barely audible. "She didn't wake up one morning." "The doctors tried, but she was already gone." Daniel nodded, not interrupting. "Greg, my stepdad, he was okay at first, sad like me. But then he started drinking a lot, forgetting things, sometimes forgetting about me." Emma picked at a loose thread on her jeans. "Then one day he took me downtown, said to wait while he got something from a store. He never came back." "How long were you on your own?" Daniel asked gently. Emma shrugged. "Don't know exactly. The leaves were just starting to change colors when he left. They're almost all gone now." Daniel's expression tightened briefly with controlled anger, but his voice remained calm. "Thank you for telling me. That helps me understand better." "Are you going to try to find him?" Emma asked, sudden fear in her voice. "Do you want me to?" She shook her head vehemently. "Then no," Daniel assured her. "Not right now, anyway. My focus is on keeping you safe." Later that evening, after a dinner of homemade macaroni and cheese, Daniel gave Emma a tour of the apartment, showing her where towels were kept, how to use the shower controls, which drawer in the bathroom held new toothbrushes and children's. "Toothpaste. I thought maybe we could get a few more things for your room tomorrow," he suggested. "Make it feel more like your space." Emma looked at him with confusion. "My room?" "While you're staying with us," Daniel clarified, "even if it's temporary, you should have things that feel like yours." That night, as Emma settled into bed, Josh appeared in her doorway clutching a stuffed elephant. "This is Ellie," he announced, holding out the well-loved toy. "She helps with bad dreams. You can borrow her if you want." Emma hesitated before accepting the elephant. "Don't you need her?" Josh considered this seriously. "I've got Rex," he explained, revealing a dinosaur tucked under his arm. "And Daddy's room is right next to mine, but you're all alone in here." The simple kindness of this gesture, from a child who had so casually shared his home, his father, and now his treasured comfort object, brought an unfamiliar sting to Emma's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. After Josh left, Emma hugged Ellie, close, breathing in the scent of fabric softener and the indefinable essence of a loved toy. Outside her window, Portland's lights twinkled in the darkness, no longer seeming quite so cold and distant. For the second night, she slept in safety. For the second night, She allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this strange new arrangement might last a little longer than just one more day. 2 weeks had passed since Emma first stepped into Daniel's apartment. 2 weeks of regular meals, warm baths, and sleeping in the same bed each night. 2 weeks of watching cartoons with Josh on Saturday mornings, of helping Daniel prepare dinner, of learning that this temporary arrangement kept extending one day at a time. On this particular Monday morning, Emma stood frozen in the hallway wearing a new purple backpack filled with school supplies. Today would be her first day at Westside Elementary School, where Daniel had managed to enroll her using temporary emergency guardianship paperwork his friend Melissa from the Children's Center had helped arrange. "We can't keep delaying this, sweetheart," Daniel said gently, kneeling beside her. "Education is required by law, and more importantly, it's good for you. Josh loves his kindergarten class, and you'll be just 2 classrooms down in first grade." Emma clutched the straps of her backpack tighter. During her months on the street, she'd learned to become invisible, to blend into backgrounds to avoid attention. School meant visibility. Visibility meant questions she couldn't answer. "What if they ask about my mum, or where I was before?" she whispered. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've practiced this, remember? If anyone asks complicated questions, you can say you're staying with family friends while your dad is. Working things out. It's not even a lie, we are friends now, aren't we?" Emma nodded reluctantly. In truth, she'd grown attached to this makeshift family arrangement faster than she'd expected. Josh's easy acceptance and Daniel's consistent kindness had created small cracks in the protective wall she'd built around herself. "And I'll be right there at pickup time," Daniel promised. 3 o'clock sharp. Josh bounded into the hallway, his dinosaur backpack bouncing against his small frame. "Ready, Emma? We can sit together on the bus." The school bus was noisy and intimidating. Emma sat rigidly beside Josh, who chattered excitedly about his friends and teacher. She envied his easy confidence, his unquestioning trust that the world was fundamentally safe and good. At the school entrance, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, Emma's first-grade teacher. She seemed to understand Emma's nervousness without explanation, gently guiding her to a desk near the window, while allowing Josh to give Emma a quick tour of the classroom before heading to his own kindergarten room. "We're so happy to have you join us, Emma," Mrs. Chen said warmly. "I think you'll fit right in." The morning passed in a blur of introductions, assessments, and navigating unfamiliar routines. Emma remained quiet, speaking only when directly addressed, observing her classmates with cautious curiosity. They seemed impossibly carefree, raising hands eagerly, laughing loudly, moving through the classroom with entitled confidence. At lunchtime, she sat alone at the end of a long table, methodically eating the lunch Daniel had packed. A sandwich, cut into star shapes, apple slices, a small container of yogurt, and a chocolate chip cookie carefully wrapped in a napkin with a small note that read, "You're doing great," in Daniel's handwriting. "Can I sit here?" A girl with dark braids and glasses appeared beside her, lunch tray in hand. Emma hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'm Zoe," the girl announced, settling beside her. "I like your sandwich stars. My mum says she doesn't have time for fancy shapes." She studied Emma with frank interest. "You're new." "Yes," Emma answered simply. "Where did you come from?" Emma froze, sandwich halfway to her mouth. The practiced answer fled her mind, replaced by flashes of rainy nights under store awnings, of digging through trash cans for food. "I used to live with my mom," she finally said. "Now I live with Daniel and Josh." To her relief, Zoe seemed satisfied with this vague explanation. "My dad lives in Seattle. I see him on holidays. Is Daniel your dad now?" The question hit Emma with unexpected force. "No, just watching me for a while." "Oh." Zoe took a bite of her pizza. "Well, you can sit with me tomorrow too if you want." By the time the final bell rang, Emma was exhausted from the constant vigilance of navigating new social terrain. When she spotted Daniel waiting exactly where he promised, relief washed over her with such intensity that she ran the last few steps to his side. "There's my girl," he smiled, accepting her silent hug. "How was your first day?" Okay, Emma mumbled into his jacket. Josh erupted from his classroom a moment later, bursting with stories about his day. As they walked home, Emma listened to his enthusiastic account of recess games and art projects, content to let his chatter fill the space. That evening, as Daniel helped Emma with her first homework assignment, a simple worksheet practicing addition and subtraction, he noticed her unusual precision with numbers. "You're quite good at math," he observed. Emma shrugged. "Mum taught me. She said numbers always tell the truth." A shadow passed over her face. She was good with money, not like Greg. It was the first time she'd voluntarily mentioned her mother since arriving. Daniel treaded carefully. "She sounds like a smart woman. What was her name?" "Sarah." Emma's voice softened. "Sarah Reynolds. She worked at a bank downtown. She had a special calculator that printed numbers on paper tape." "And what did she like to do for fun?" Daniel asked, maintaining his casual tone. Emma's forehead creased in concentration. She liked baking cookies and reading mystery books, and she sang all the time when she cooked, when she drove, even when she thought I was sleeping. Her eyes glistened suddenly. "I'm starting to forget what she looked like." Daniel set the homework aside and moved closer. "That happens sometimes, but it doesn't mean you're forgetting her. Our memories change shape, but they stay with us." "I don't have any pictures," Emma whispered, the admission clearly painful. "Maybe we could draw her," Daniel suggested. "I'm not a great artist, but Josh has been taking art classes at the community center. He might help." Josh, overhearing from his spot on the living room floor, immediately abandoned his toys and retrieved his art supplies. "What color was her hair, her eyes? Did she wear glasses like my teacher?" That night, the three of them sat at the kitchen table, creating portraits of Sarah Reynolds based on Emma's descriptions. Josh drew with enthusiastic if imprecise strokes, producing a smiling stick figure with enormous yellow hair. Daniel sketched more carefully, trying to capture the details Emma provided. Wavy brown hair cut at the shoulders, a small nose, eyes that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. Emma's own drawing was simple but heartfelt, a woman in a dress holding the hand of a smaller figure, standing before a house with a triangular roof and a chimney that Emma explained they never actually had. But Mum always wanted one. Daniel hung all three drawings on the refrigerator. "There," he said softly. "Now she's watching over us in the kitchen." Later, as Daniel tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question that had been troubling her all day. "Why are you doing all this for me? The school, the clothes, the food, everything." Daniel considered his answer carefully. "Do you remember the day we met? When you helped Josh in the park?" Emma nodded. "You didn't have to do that. You could have stayed hidden, kept yourself safe, but you saw someone who needed help, and you helped them anyway." He smoothed her blanket. "Sometimes people just help each other, Emma. Not because they have to, but because they can. But you don't even know me." "I'm getting to know you," he corrected gently, "and I like who I'm getting to know." That night, Emma dreamed of her mother. Not the pale, tired version from the hospital, but the vibrant Sarah who had twirled her around the kitchen while singing off-key to radio songs. In the dream, her mother was smiling, pointing towards something Emma couldn't quite see, something ahead, not behind. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. School days, homework at the kitchen table, grocery shopping together on weekends. Each evening, Emma would help set the table while Josh arranged napkins into elaborate shapes he'd learned from YouTube videos. Daniel would cook, sometimes recruiting them as assistants for simpler tasks like tearing lettuce or stirring batter. It wasn't perfect. Emma still woke sometimes in the night, disoriented and afraid. She still hoarded food in her dresser drawer, a habit Daniel pretended not to notice. She still flinched at sudden movements and loud noises, but the tight knot of constant fear in her chest had begun to loosen. At school, her friendship with Zoe deepened. They sat together at lunch, partnered during group activities, and exchanged colored pencils and erasers, shaped like animals. Mrs. Chen noted Emma's academic strengths, her facility with numbers, her careful penmanship, her surprising vocabulary, while gently supporting areas where she struggled, particularly in raising her hand to participate. One afternoon in late October, Mrs. Chen asked Emma to stay behind while the other children headed to recess. "Am I in trouble?" Emma asked immediately, her body tensing. "Not at all," Mrs. Chen assured her. "I just wanted to check in. You've been with us almost a month now, and I've noticed such wonderful progress." She showed Emma a math worksheet covered in gold stars. "You're doing exceptional work. Are things going well at home too?" The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. Emma knew enough about adult concerns to understand the real question beneath. Was she safe? Was she happy? "Daniel helps me with homework," she offered cautiously. "And Josh shares his toys. We made Halloween decorations for the windows last weekend." Mrs. Chen smiled. "It sounds lovely. And Daniel, he's taking good care of you." Emma nodded, then added with quiet conviction, "He never forgets about me." It was the highest praise she could offer, though Mrs. Chen couldn't possibly understand its full significance. The teacher seemed satisfied, however, and sent Emma to join her classmates for the remaining minutes of recess. As Emma stepped into the playground sunshine, watching Zoe wave enthusiastically from the swings, she felt a strange new sensation expanding in her chest, something like roots taking hold in soil after too long suspended in air. She was beginning to belong. November brought colder temperatures and the first Christmas displays in store windows. Emma had now been living with Daniel and Josh for nearly 2 months, long enough that she no longer tensed when the apartment door opened, no longer hoarded quite so much food in her dresser drawer, no longer startled when Josh bounded into her room without warning. On this particular Saturday morning, the three of them were headed to Powell's Books, Portland's famous bookstore that occupied an entire city block. Daniel had promised each child could select one book as an early holiday gift. "The Shiwadi children's section is amazing," Daniel explained as they walked downtown, Josh skipping ahead and Emma keeping pace beside Daniel. "They have reading nooks and sometimes even storytellers on weekends." Emma had discovered a love of reading since starting school. Mrs. Chen had placed her in the advanced reading group after noticing how quickly she devoured the classroom library books. Reading offered escape, knowledge, and a safe place to disappear when the real world became too overwhelming. The bookstore was bustling with weekend shoppers. Josh immediately dragged them toward the picture book section, while Emma's eyes widened at the seemingly endless shelves stretching in all directions. "Take your time," Daniel told her. "Explore a bit. We'll be right in this section if you need us." With newfound confidence, Emma wandered the aisles, trailing her fingers along book spines, occasionally pulling one out to read the back cover or first few pages. She found herself drawn to stories about resilient children, about magical worlds hidden behind ordinary doors, about families formed in unexpected ways. After selecting a novel about a girl who discovers a hidden garden, a story Mrs. Chen had mentioned but the school library didn't own, Emma made her way back to the children's section. She spotted Josh sitting cross-legged in a reading nook, already absorbed in a book about dinosaurs. But Daniel wasn't beside him. Emma scanned the area, heart rate accelerating slightly. Then she spotted him near the information desk, speaking with a bookstore employee. His expression was tense, his posture rigid. Something was wrong. She approached cautiously, catching fragments of conversation. "Looking for a little girl," the employee was saying. "Claims his stepdaughter is missing. He's been showing her photo to customers." Daniel's voice was controlled but urgent. "What does he look like?" "Tall, thin, reddish-brown hair, wearing a grey jacket. He seemed agitated." Emma froze, the book clutched against her chest. Greg. It had to be Greg. But how had he found her? And why would he be looking for her now, after all this time? Daniel turned and saw her standing there, understanding immediately from her expression that she'd overheard. He crossed to her quickly, kneeling to eye level. "Emma, listen to me," he said softly but firmly. "We're going to leave right now very calmly. I want you to go get Josh while I pay for your books at the register over there. Can you do that?" She nodded, unable to speak past the knot of terror in her throat. "Everything will be okay," Daniel assured her, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "I won't let anything happen to you." Emma retrieved Josh, who protested, leaving his comfortable reading spot until he saw her face. Even at 5, Josh had developed a remarkable sensitivity to Emma's emotions. "What's wrong?" he whispered as they walked toward the register where Daniel was paying. "We have to go," was all Emma could manage. They were nearly to the exit when Emma heard a voice that sent ice through her veins. "Emma? Emma Reynolds?" She didn't turn around. Didn't need to. She would recognize that voice anywhere, the voice that had promised to return for her and never did. Daniel stepped protectively in front of both children, turning to face the man approaching them. Greg looked worse than Emma remembered, thinner, unshaven, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. He was wearing clothes that might have once been nice, but now appeared rumpled and stained. "That's my stepdaughter," Greg said, pointing at Emma, who pressed herself against Daniel's side. "I've been looking everywhere for her." Daniel's voice was calm but steel-edged. "I think you must be mistaken." "Like hell I am." Greg took another step forward. "Emma, tell this man who I am." Emma remained silent, trembling visibly now. Josh had moved behind Daniel alongside her, his small hand finding hers. "Sir, you're making these children uncomfortable," Daniel said evenly. "I suggest you step back." A bookstore security guard had noticed the confrontation and was approaching. "Everything okay here?" "No," Greg said immediately. "This man has my stepdaughter." "He left me," Emma suddenly spoke, her voice small but clear. "He took me downtown and told me to wait. He never came back." Greg's expression shifted, a flash of shame quickly replaced by defensiveness. "I was going through a rough time. Her mother had just passed. I was dealing with that. I came back later, but you were gone." The lie was so blatant that Emma found her fear transforming into something else. Anger. "You never came back. I waited for hours. I had to sleep in a store doorway." The security guard was watching the exchange with increasing concern. "Maybe we should continue this conversation in the office." "That won't be necessary," Daniel said firmly. "We're leaving now." He turned to the guard. "This man abandoned his stepdaughter months ago. She's been under emergency foster care while authorities have been trying to locate family members." This wasn't entirely true, but close enough to the arrangements Melissa had been working on. Greg's face reddened. "You have no right to her. I'm her legal guardian." A guardian who left a 6-year-old alone on the street? Daniel's controlled tone finally cracked with anger. "If you'd like to discuss legal guardianship, we can certainly involve the police and child protective services." At the mention of authorities, Greg hesitated. Emma realized with sudden clarity that he probably had reasons to avoid official scrutiny. "Look, I made a mistake." Greg's tone changed, becoming placating. "I've been getting my life together. Got a new job, a better apartment. I want to make things right." "How did you find her?" Daniel asked. Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Saw her picture in the school newsletter, online, for some academic achievement thing. Recognized her right away." Emma remembered the photo. Her class had won a district-wide math competition. Mrs. Chen had taken a group picture for the school website. She hadn't even considered that Greg might see it. The security guard, still hovering nearby, addressed Greg. "Sir, I think you should leave now. If there's a legitimate custody issue, that needs to be handled through proper channels, not by confronting a child in a bookstore." Greg looked from the guard to Daniel to Emma, calculation evident in his expression. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said to Daniel. "She's still legally my responsibility. I know where she goes to school now. I know where to find her." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as Greg turned and walked away. Daniel immediately ushered Emma and Josh outside, taking a route in the opposite direction from Greg. Once they were several blocks away, he found a quiet cafe and guided them to a corner table. "Are you okay?" he asked Emma, who had not spoken since their confrontation. She nodded mechanically, though she was anything but okay. Her safe new world had just been shattered. Greg had found her. Greg knew where she went to school. Greg could take her away from Daniel and Josh. "He can't just take you," Josh declared with the simple certainty of a 5-year-old. "You live with us now." Daniel ordered hot chocolates for the children and coffee for himself. As they waited for their drinks, he made a phone call to Melissa, speaking in low, urgent tones about emergency custody orders and restraining options. When he hung up, he turned to Emma with determined eyes. "I want you to know something important. What happened today was scary, but you are not going back to him, I promise you that." "But he said—" "I know what he said," Daniel interrupted gently, "and legally, things are complicated. But Melissa is already working on it. She's calling a judge she knows who can issue an emergency protection order today. A special kind of paper that says he has to stay away from you while the courts figure things out." "What if they make me go with him?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "They won't," Daniel said with such conviction that Emma almost believed him. "There's a system in place to protect children, and sometimes it works slowly, but it does work, especially when there's clear evidence of abandonment." "What's abandonment?" Josh asked, chocolate mustache adorning his upper lip. "It means leaving. Someone who depends on you," Daniel explained carefully. "Especially a child. It's not just wrong, it's against the law." Emma had never considered that what Greg did was actually illegal. She'd somehow internalized the idea that she had been the problem, too needy, too expensive, too much of a reminder of her mother. "I need to make a few more calls," Daniel continued. "Then we're going to go straight home and stay there today. Tomorrow morning we'll meet with Melissa and make a plan." By the time they returned to the apartment, Emma was physically and emotionally exhausted. Daniel made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches that she could only pick at, and then suggested she rest for a while. To her surprise, he didn't send her to her room alone, but instead put on a movie in the living room, creating a nest of blankets and pillows on the couch where both children could curl up together. "I'll be right in the kitchen," he assured them, just making some more calls. Emma pretended to watch the animated film, but her attention was on Daniel's voice drifting from the kitchen, serious, determined, occasionally rising with controlled anger before dropping again to measured tones. "Absolutely. Unconscionable. Months on the street. Clear case of abandonment. Emergency custody hearing. Yes, I understand the complications, but school safety protocols. Restraining. Order?" Josh fell asleep halfway through the movie, his head lolling against Emma's shoulder. Despite her anxiety, she found his warm presence comforting. In the 2 months they'd lived together, Josh had transformed from a stranger into something like a brother, annoying sometimes with his endless dinosaur facts and tendency to barge into her room, but also fiercely loyal and unfailingly kind. The thought of losing this, of losing him and Daniel and the safety they represented, made her chest physically ache. Daniel returned to the living room, his expression softening at the sight of the children huddled together. He sat on the edge of the couch, speaking quietly to avoid waking Josh. "Melissa pulled some strings," he told Emma. "A judge has issued a temporary emergency order preventing Greg from contacting you or coming near your school. It's just a first step, but it gives us breathing room." "What happens next?" Emma asked. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There will be a hearing, probably within a week. The judge will review the situation and decide on a more permanent arrangement." He hesitated, then added, "Emma, I need to ask you something important." She tensed, waiting. "Would you be willing to tell a judge what happened, about how Greg left you, about how you lived afterward?" The thought was terrifying, speaking to a stranger in authority about the most traumatic period of her life. But she thought about the alternative, being sent back to Greg, losing her new home, losing Daniel and Josh. "Yes," she whispered, "if it means I can stay with you." Daniel's eyes glistened suspiciously. "You're the bravest person I know, Emma." "Reynolds." That night, after Josh was asleep, Emma crept into the living room where Daniel was working on his laptop. He looked up, unsurprised to see her. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head, clutching Ellie the elephant to her chest. "What if Greg comes here?" Daniel patted the couch beside him, and she climbed up, tucking herself against his side. "He doesn't know where we live," Daniel assured her, "and I've already spoken with the building manager about increasing security. Plus, that court order I mentioned makes it illegal for him to approach you." "But what if he doesn't care about that?" Daniel considered this seriously. "Then he would be breaking the law and the police would stop him. But Emma, I don't think he's actually interested in taking care of you. What I saw today was a man who suddenly realized he might be in trouble for what he did, and now he's trying to cover his tracks." Emma processed this. "So, he doesn't really want me back?" "I think what he wants is to avoid consequences," Daniel said carefully. "And maybe there might be financial benefits he's thinking about. Like Mom's insurance money," Emma said with surprising insight. "He always talked about that when she was in the hospital." Daniel looked startled, then nodded. "That could be part of it, yes." Emma leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, her next words so quiet he almost missed them. "I want to stay here, with you and Josh, forever." Daniel's arm tightened around her. "That's what I want too, Emma. And I promise you, I'm going to do everything possible to make that happen." The Monday following the bookstore encounter, Daniel kept both children home from school. Instead, they drove to a modern office building downtown where Melissa Lambert waited for them in the lobby. With her crisp pantsuit and tablet computer, she looked exactly like what she was, a dedicated professional who navigated the complex child welfare system with determination and expertise. "Emma, it's nice to finally meet you," Melissa smiled, warmly extending her hand. "Daniel has told me so much about you." Emma shook her hand cautiously, staying close to Daniel's side. Josh, picking up on the serious atmosphere, was uncharacteristically quiet. "We're meeting with Catherine Rivera today," Melissa explained as they rode the elevator to the 7th floor. "She's a family attorney who specializes in cases like yours. She's agreed to represent you pro bono. That means without charging a fee," she added, seeing Emma's confused expression. The law office was less intimidating than Emma had expected. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, and a small play area in the corner where Josh immediately settled with a bucket of Lego bricks. Catherine Rivera was a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. She greeted them warmly, inviting Daniel and Emma to sit while Melissa perched on a chair near the door, tablet ready. "I've reviewed the preliminary information Melissa provided," Catherine began, "and I want to assure you that we have a strong case for maintaining Emma's current placement with you, Daniel. However," she continued, turning to Emma, "I need to understand exactly what happened in your own words." For the next hour, Emma answered questions about her mother's passing, about Greg's behavior afterward, about the day he left her downtown. She described in halting sentences how she'd survived on the streets, sleeping in hidden corners of parks, washing in public restrooms, finding food where she could. She explained how she'd met Daniel and Josh and how her life had changed since then. Catherine took detailed notes, occasionally asking gentle follow-up questions. When Emma's voice faltered, describing a particularly frightening night when a group of teenagers had almost discovered her hiding place, Daniel reached over and took her hand, his steady presence giving her strength to continue. "You're doing wonderfully," Catherine assured her when she'd finished. "Now I need to ask some questions about your stepfather. Do you know if he legally adopted you after marrying your mother?" Emma shook her head. "He just became my stepdad when he married. Mom, she still called me Emma Reynolds, not Emma Miller." This detail seemed to please Catherine. "That's very helpful. It means he likely has no legal parental rights, although as your mother's husband at the time of her passing, he might have been granted temporary guardianship by default." She made another note. "Do you know if your mother left a will? Any document stating who should take care of you if something happened to her?" Another headshake. "I don't think so. She got sick really fast." Catherine nodded sympathetically. "And do you have any other family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles?" "Mom said my real dad left before I was born. I never met him. And her parents died when she was in college. She didn't have brothers or sisters." Daniel, who had been quietly supportive throughout, spoke up. "I've begun the process of applying for foster care certification. Melissa has fast-tracked it, but there are still home studies and background checks to complete." "Good," Catherine nodded. "That will strengthen our position. Now about the hearing on Friday. Emma, you'll need to speak to the judge, but I'll be right there with you. You just need to tell the truth, exactly like you did today." Emma's stomach twisted at the thought of facing Greg in a courtroom, of having to relive those terrible days again in front of strangers. As if reading her mind, Catherine added gently, "You can ask for a private meeting with the judge if being in the same room as your stepfather feels too difficult." After the meeting, they stopped for lunch at a cafe nearby. Josh, sensing the heaviness of the morning, made exaggerated faces with his French fries until Emma finally cracked a reluctant smile. "Everything will work out," Daniel assured her as they drove home. "Catherine knows what she's doing, and the law is on our side." Emma wanted to believe him, but years of disappointment had taught her that adults' promises, however well-intentioned, didn't always hold true. The next day brought another challenge, a visit from Diana Winters, the court-appointed social worker assigned to evaluate Emma's placement with Daniel. She arrived precisely at the scheduled time, a slim woman with a practical bob and an expression that revealed nothing as Daniel welcomed her inside. "I'll need to speak with each of you individually," she explained after brief introductions. First Daniel, then Emma, and finally a brief conversation with Josh. "I'll also need to see all areas of the home." Emma retreated to her room while Diana interviewed Daniel in the living room. She could hear the murmur of their voices, but couldn't make out the words. After nearly an hour, there was a knock at her door. "Emma, Miss Winters would like to speak with you now," Daniel called softly. Diana sat in the chair by Emma's desk, while Emma perched on the edge of her bed. The social worker's clipboard and methodical note-taking gave the conversation a clinical feel that made Emma increasingly nervous. "How long have you been living here?" Diana began. "Since September," Emma answered. 2 months and 12 days. Diana raised an eyebrow at the precision. "And how would you describe your relationship with Daniel?" Emma considered this. "He takes care of me, helps with homework, makes sure I have everything I need." "And Josh?" A small smile touched Emma's lips. "He's like a little brother. Sometimes annoying, but mostly nice." Diana nodded, making another note. "I understand you were living on the streets before Daniel found you. Can you tell me about that?" Once again, Emma recounted her story. Diana's questions were direct, sometimes uncomfortably so. She asked about Emma's mother's illness, about Greg's drinking habits, about specific incidents of neglect. Unlike Catherine, whose approach had been gentle and supportive, Diana maintained a professional distance that made Emma feel like a specimen under examination. "Do you feel safe here with Daniel?" Diana asked. "Yes," Emma answered without hesitation. "And what would you like to happen next? Ideally." Emma twisted her hands in her lap. "I want to stay here, with Daniel and Josh. Even though Daniel isn't a relative, even though you've only known him a short time." Emma looked directly at Diana for the first time. "He came back for me, when he said he would." Something flickered in Diana's expression, a momentary softening, before she returned to her clipboard. "Thank you, Emma. I'd like to see your room now, if that's all right. Just the physical space." Emma stood aside as Diana opened dresser drawers, checked the closet, examined the bathroom Emma shared with Josh. She noted the new clothes hanging neatly, the books stacked on the nightstand. The small collection of treasures Emma had accumulated, a sparkly rock from the park, a friendship bracelet from Zoe, movie ticket stubs from her first ever trip to a theater with Daniel and Josh. Diana paused at the refrigerator in the kitchen, studying the drawings of Emma's mother still prominently displayed. "Did you draw these?" she asked. "Me and Josh and Daniel," Emma explained, so I wouldn't forget what she looked like. Again, that flicker of something softer in Diana's professional demeanor. She made another note before asking to speak with Josh. Daniel took Emma to the building's small courtyard, while Diana interviewed Josh. They sat on a bench near the central fountain, watching water splash over colored stones. "How do you think "It's going?" Emma asked anxiously. Daniel considered this honestly. "Ms. Winters is being very thorough, which is actually good. She needs to be certain you're in the right place." He hesitated, then added, "She asked me some difficult questions about my motivations." "What does that mean?" "She wanted to know why I decided to take in a child I barely knew, why I didn't just call social services immediately, whether I fully understand the long-term commitment of caring for you." Emma's heart sank. "What did you tell her?" Daniel turned to face her directly. "I told her the truth. That from the moment I saw you in that park with Josh, I recognized something in you. A strength, a goodness that survived despite everything you'd been through. That helping you wasn't a decision I made. It was the only right thing to do." He smiled slightly. "I also told her that these past 2 months have been challenging in many ways, but that having you join our family has brought a dimension to our lives that I didn't even know was missing." "Even with all the problems?" Emma asked in a small voice. "Even with Greg and court and everything?" "Even with all of that," Daniel confirmed. "Families stick together through difficult times. That's what makes them families." When they returned to the apartment, Diana was finishing her conversation with Josh, who was earnestly showing her his dinosaur collection. She spent another 30 minutes inspecting the apartment, checking smoke detectors, examining the contents of the refrigerator and cupboards, making notes about sleeping arrangements and safety measures. Before leaving, Diana addressed Daniel with measured professionalism. "I'll be submitting my report to the court tomorrow. I'll also be conducting a similar home evaluation of Mr. Miller's residence this afternoon." Emma's breath caught at the reminder that Greg, wherever he was living now, was still a factor in the equation. "And I should inform you," Diana continued, "that the court has scheduled a DNA test for Thursday." "DNA test?" Daniel repeated, confused. "For what purpose?" "Mr. Miller has raised the possibility that he may be Emma's biological father, not merely her stepfather as previously understood. If true, it would significantly impact the custody determination." The room seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. Greg, her biological father? It couldn't be true. Her mother had always said her real father left before she was born, that he wasn't part of their lives. "That's impossible," Daniel said firmly. Emma's mother told her. "Nevertheless, the court has ordered the test," Diana interrupted. "The results should be available before Friday's hearing." She handed Daniel a paper with details about the testing facility. "Emma will need to be there at 9 a.m. on Thursday." After Diana left, Daniel sat heavily on the couch, running both hands through his hair in a gesture Emma had come to recognize as stress. Josh climbed into his lap, sensing his father's tension. "Is Emma going away?" he asked directly. "No," Daniel said, pulling Josh close while extending his other arm to Emma, who hesitantly joined them on the couch. "We're going to fight to keep our family together." "But what if—" Emma couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too terrible to voice. "Even if Greg's claim was somehow true, which I strongly doubt, biology isn't the only factor courts consider," Daniel assured her. "Abandonment is abandonment, regardless of DNA." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced her room, mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Greg really was her biological father? What if the judge believed him instead of her? What if tomorrow was her last full day with Daniel and Josh? The sound of soft knocking interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened her door to find Josh standing there in dinosaur pajamas clutching Rex the stuffed T-Rex. "I had a bad dream," he said, though Emma suspected he was actually checking on her. "Can I stay with you for a little while?" She nodded, moving aside to let him in. They settled side by side on her bed, backs against the headboard. "When my mum went to heaven," Josh said suddenly, "I was scared all the time that Daddy would go too. I didn't want to let him out of my sight." Emma was startled by this insight into Josh's experience. He rarely spoke about his mother, who had passed away from an illness before Emma met them. "What happened?" she asked softly. "Daddy promised he wouldn't leave me. And he never breaks promises." Josh looked at her solemnly. "He promised he wouldn't let anyone take you away either." "But what if the judge makes him? What if they say I have to go with Greg?" Josh considered this with the straightforward logic. They have a 5-year-old. Then we'll come get you back. Me and Daddy and Mrs. Chen and Zoe and everyone. We'll tell the judge he made a mistake. The simple certainty in his voice was oddly comforting. Emma leaned her head against his, and eventually they both drifted to sleep, finding safety in each other's presence. Thursday morning arrived with grey skies and steady rain, fitting weather for the day of the DNA test. Emma was silent during the drive to the medical facility, answering the technician's questions in monosyllables as they swabbed the inside of her cheek. Greg was scheduled for testing later that day, the technician explained, with results expedited for the following day's hearing. "What happens tomorrow?" Emma asked as they drove home, raindrops streaming down the car windows like tears. At the hearing, Daniel explained the process as clearly as he could, how they would meet Catherine at the courthouse, how the judge would review documents and hear statements, how Emma would have the chance to tell her story. "Will I have to see Greg?" The question that had been haunting her for days. "Catherine has requested that you speak to the judge privately, without Greg present," Daniel assured her. "The judge hasn't ruled on that yet, but Catherine thinks it's likely to be granted." That afternoon, Melissa called with news that made Daniel pace the living room with renewed energy. "The school records came through," he told Emma after hanging up. "Your original enrollment paperwork from kindergarten, signed by your mother. It lists your father as unknown and specifically notes that Sarah had full legal custody. If Greg tries to claim he's your biological father tomorrow, this directly contradicts that." A small flame of hope kindled in Emma's chest. That night, Daniel prepared a special dinner, Emma's favorite pasta with extra cheese, and let the children eat ice cream while watching a movie of their choice. The deliberate normalcy of the evening was both comforting and painful, knowing that tomorrow might change everything. As Emma finally settled into bed, exhausted from the emotional strain of waiting, Daniel sat beside her. "No matter what happens, tomorrow," he said softly, "I want you to remember something important. Family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who loves you, who shows up for you, who makes room in their heart for you." He gently brushed her hair back from her forehead. "You will always have a home with us, Emma. Always." As his footsteps retreated down the hallway, Emma clutched Ellie the elephant to her chest and whispered a desperate prayer to whoever might be listening. "Please, please let me stay. Friday." Dawned clear and cold, the previous day's rain giving way to crystalline blue skies. Emma stood at her bedroom window, watching early morning light transform puddles into mirrors. The beauty seemed at odds with the knot of dread in her stomach. "Emma, time for breakfast," Daniel called softly from the hallway. She'd been dressed for an hour already, wearing the outfit they'd chosen together, navy blue dress, white cardigan, shiny Mary Jane shoes. "For confidence," Daniel had explained while shopping for the hearing. "Not because appearances should matter, but because sometimes feeling put together on the outside helps us feel stronger on the inside." In the kitchen, Josh was already at the table, unusually subdued as he picked at his waffle. Daniel was making coffee, his movements precise and controlled in a way that told Emma he was working hard to project calm. "I'm not hungry," Emma said, eyeing the plate Daniel set before her. "Just a few bites," he encouraged. "Today's going to require energy." She managed half a waffle and some fruit before her throat closed up entirely. Daniel didn't push further, simply wrapping a banana and granola bar for later. Melissa met them in the courthouse lobby at precisely 8:45 a.m. She wore a formal suit and carried both her tablet and a leather portfolio. "Catherine is already upstairs, meeting with the judge," she explained, leading them toward the elevator. "The DNA results came in this morning. She'll brief us before the hearing starts." Emma's heart pounded painfully against her ribs. The DNA test. Would it confirm what her mother had always told her, or would it reveal Greg's shocking claim to be true? The family court waiting area was a study in contained anxiety, people speaking in hushed tones, children clutching stuffed animals or electronic games, attorneys conferring in corners. Emma spotted Greg sitting alone on a bench across the room. He'd made an effort with his appearance, hair combed, wearing a tie with his rumpled suit, but his leg bounced with nervous energy, and he kept checking his phone. Daniel positioned himself to block Emma's view, steering them toward a private conference room where Catherine waited. "Good morning," the attorney greeted them, her professional demeanor tempered with warmth. "We have some developments to discuss before the hearing." Once the door closed behind them, Catherine got straight to the point. First, the DNA results came back negative. Greg Miller is definitively not Emma's biological father. Relief washed over Emma so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. Daniel steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "As we expected," Catherine continued, "but it strengthens our position considerably. Mr. Miller has been informed of the results." "That's excellent news," Melissa said, making a note on her tablet. "What about the judge's decision on Emma's testimony?" "Judge Montgomery has granted our request. Emma will speak with her privately in chambers, with only the court reporter and myself present." Catherine turned to Emma. "That means you won't have to see or speak to Mr. Miller during your testimony. You'll just tell the judge what happened, exactly like we practiced." Emma nodded, relieved but still nervous. "Now for the complication." Catherine's expression grew more serious. In reviewing Emma's documentation, the court clerk discovered a discrepancy in her mother's death certificate. The name is recorded as Sarah Miller Reynolds, rather than simply Sarah Reynolds as it appears on Emma's birth certificate. Daniel frowned. "Why is that a problem?" "It creates a question about legal identity and documentation," Catherine explained. "The judge is concerned about potential irregularities. She's indicated that while she's sympathetic to Emma's situation, she may order a temporary placement in state care while these documentation issues are resolved." "A foster home?" Daniel's voice rose slightly. "After everything Emma's been through? Or a group facility, possibly," Catherine acknowledged grimly. "I've argued strenuously against it, emphasizing the trauma of another displacement. I've proposed that the current arrangement continue while we straighten out the paperwork, but Judge Montgomery is known for being by the book." Emma felt the room tilt around her. A facility? Strangers? After finally finding safety with Daniel and Josh, the thought of being taken away was unbearable. She struggled to breathe, spots dancing at the edges of her vision. "Emma?" Daniel knelt beside her chair, voice steady despite his own distress. "Look at me. Breathe with me. In, out. That's it." Josh had abandoned his chair to press against Emma's side, his small hand finding hers. "You're not going away," he said with fierce certainty. "Daddy won't let them take you." Daniel didn't contradict his son, though his eyes held worry as he met Catherine's gaze over Emma's head. "We have one advantage," Catherine continued once Emma had calmed somewhat. "Ms. Winters filed her report yesterday evening. While I haven't seen the full document, Melissa informs me that it's largely favorable." Melissa nodded. Diana was impressed by the stability of the home environment and the clear attachment between Emma and both Daniel and Josh. She noted some procedural concerns about the initial failure to report finding Emma, but ultimately recommended maintaining the current placement while pursuing formal foster certification. "The hearing will start in 15 minutes, Catherine checked her watch. "Emma, do you need a moment before we go in?" Emma shook her head, squaring her small shoulders. If this was her chance to stay with Daniel and Josh, she would find her courage. Courtroom 3B was smaller than Emma had imagined, with polished wooden benches and an imposing desk where Judge Montgomery would sit. Catherine directed them to seats at one table, while Greg and his attorney, a harried-looking man with coffee stains on his tie, took the other. Emma kept her eyes fixed forward, refusing to look in Greg's direction. A side door opened and everyone rose as Judge Montgomery entered. A tall black woman with silver-streaked braids coiled at the nape of her neck and reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She moved with deliberate dignity, taking her seat and surveying the room with keen eyes that missed nothing. The proceedings began with formal introductions and statements of purpose. Catherine presented their case first, outlining Emma's abandonment, her subsequent months on the street, her chance meeting with Daniel and Josh, and the stable home they had provided since September. Greg's attorney argued that his client had experienced a momentary lapse in judgment during a period of grief, that he had been searching for Emma since that day, and that he was now in a position to resume his role as guardian. Emma listened with growing dismay as the adults debated her fate as if she weren't present. When Judge Montgomery called for the home evaluation reports, Diana Winters herself appeared, summoned to present her findings directly. Ms. Winters, please summarize your conclusions regarding both potential placements, the judge directed. Diana, approach the witness stand with professional composure. Your Honor, I conducted thorough evaluations of both households. Mr. Anderson's home is well maintained with appropriate accommodations for Emma, including private sleeping space, adequate nutrition, and educational support. The interaction I observed between Emma and Mr. Anderson demonstrates a secure attachment developing, despite the relatively short period of their acquaintance. She paused, consulting her notes. Mr. Miller's current residence is a one-bedroom apartment above a convenience store. While physically adequate, I noted concerning elements including minimal food supplies, absence of any preparations for a child's arrival, and Mr. Miller's admitted inconsistent employment history. And your recommendation, Judge Montgomery prompted. Diana's gaze flickered briefly to Emma before returning to the judge. Based solely on environmental factors, Mr. Anderson's home offers superior stability and resources. However, she added, I must note the irregular circumstances of Emma's initial placement and the lack of proper procedural adherence. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Ms. Winters. Now I believe we're ready for Emma's testimony. I'll hear from her in my chambers as previously arranged. Emma followed Judge Montgomery and Catherine through a side door into a smaller room furnished with a desk, bookshelves, and several comfortable chairs. A court reporter sat unobtrusively in the corner with a stenography machine. Have a seat. Emma, Judge Montgomery said, her formal demeanor softening slightly. I know this is difficult, but I need to hear directly from you what happened. With Catherine's encouraging nod, Emma began her story once more, how her mother had fallen ill, how Greg had gradually withdrawn after her passing, the day he'd left her downtown with a promise to return. She described her months of survival on Portland's streets, her chance meeting with Josh and Daniel, and the home they had created together. Judge Montgomery listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never interrupting Emma's narrative flow. When Emma described her terror at seeing Greg in the bookstore, the judge's expression darkened momentarily. And now, Judge Montgomery said when Emma had finished, tell me what you want to happen next. Emma met the judge's eyes directly. I want to stay with Daniel and Josh. They're my family now. Even though you've only known them a short time? Time doesn't matter, Emma said with simple conviction. They make me feel safe. They never forget about me. They helped me remember my mom in a good way. Her voice wavered slightly. Please don't send me away from them. The judge studied Emma thoughtfully. Thank you for your honesty, Emma. You've been very brave today. When they returned to the courtroom, Emma immediately sought Daniel's reassuring presence. Josh, who had been sitting quietly beside his father, brightened visibly at her return. Having heard testimony and reviewed the evidence, Judge Montgomery began, I must address several concerns. First, the documentation discrepancy regarding Sarah Reynolds Miller's legal name must be resolved. Second, while Mr. Anderson's home provides a stable environment, his initial failure to report finding Emma reflects a concerning disregard for proper procedures. Emma's heart sank as the judge continued. However, I cannot ignore the clear evidence of abandonment by Mr. Miller, nor the strong attachment that has formed between Emma and the Anderson family. The judge looked directly at Greg, her expression stern. Mr. Miller, your claim to parental rights is significantly undermined by your actions. Leaving a 6-year-old child alone in an urban setting is not a momentary lapse in judgment, it is endangerment. Greg shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. Given the complexity of this case, Judge Montgomery continued, I am inclined to order temporary placement in state care while the documentation issues are resolved and Mr. Anderson completes. Proper foster certification. Daniel's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. Josh made a small sound of distress. However, the judge held up a hand. I'm also reluctant to subject this child to further disruption after the stability she has finally found. Into the tense silence that followed, Diana Winters unexpectedly stood. Your Honor, if I may? The judge nodded permission. While my report acknowledges the procedural irregularities in this case, I feel compelled to add a personal observation. Diana's professional demeanor softened slightly. In my 15 years of social work, I have rarely witnessed a more natural familial bond than what exists between Emma and the Andersons. During my home visit, I observed not just appropriate care, but genuine attachment, mutual support, and what I can only describe as love. She hesitated, then added, in my professional opinion, separating them now would cause significant emotional harm to all parties. Judge Montgomery considered this, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her legal pad. Finally, she spoke. In light of Ms. Winters' professional assessment and the preponderance of evidence regarding Emma's best interests, I am ruling as follows. Temporary legal guardianship of Emma Reynolds is granted to Daniel Anderson, pending resolution of documentation discrepancies and completion of foster care certification. Mr. Miller's petition for guardianship is denied. A restraining order preventing Mr. Miller from contacting Emma or approaching her school will remain in effect for 6 months, at which time it may be reviewed. She fixed Greg with a stern look. Mr. Miller, I strongly suggest you focus on stabilizing your own situation rather than pursuing custody. This court would look more favorably on efforts to provide financial support for Emma's care than further custody challenges. Greg's shoulders slumped in defeat as his attorney whispered something in his ear. Mr. Anderson, the judge continued, turning to Daniel, you are directed to work with family services to complete all proper certifications within 30 days. This court will reconvene at that time to evaluate permanent guardianship or adoption proceedings. Her expression softened slightly as she looked at Emma. The best interests of the child remain this court's primary concern. With a decisive tap of her gavel, it was over. Emma remained frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. We won, Catherine whispered, gathering her papers with a satisfied smile. You're staying with Daniel and Josh. The reality sank in slowly, then all at once. Emma turned to Daniel, who was kneeling beside her chair, his eyes suspiciously bright. We're going home, he said simply. All of us. Josh launched himself at Emma, nearly knocking her from her chair with the force of his hug. Told you, he said, voice muffled against her shoulder. Told you we'd stay together. As they gathered their belongings, Emma noticed Diana watching them from across the room. On impulse, she broke away from Daniel and approached the social worker. Thank you, she said simply. Diana's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing a genuine smile. You have a beautiful family, Emma. Take good care of each other. Outside, the courthouse autumn sunlight bathed the world in golden warmth. Emma tilted her face upward, feeling something tight and fearful inside her chest finally begin to unravel. Ice cream, Daniel announced. I think this calls for a triple scoop. Celebration. As they walked toward the car, Emma suddenly stopped, tugging on Daniel's hand. What happens now with all the paperwork and everything? Daniel knelt to her level, his expression serious but optimistic. Now we make it official. There's still work to do. Forms to file, interviews to complete, maybe a few more meetings with social workers. But today's ruling means you stay with us while all that happens, he smiled. And when it's all finished, if it's what you want, we can talk about making our family permanent through adoption. What's adoption? Josh asked, always alert to new vocabulary. It's when someone becomes legally part of a family, Daniel explained carefully. When the law recognizes what we already know in our hearts, that we belong together. Emma considered this. Would I be Emma Anderson then? Not Reynolds anymore? Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face. That would be your choice. You could keep your name to honor your... Mom, take our name or even have both. Emma Reynolds Anderson. Emma Reynolds Anderson, she repeated softly, testing how it felt in her mouth. Somehow it didn't feel like erasing her mother at all. It felt like adding something new while keeping what mattered. I like it, she decided. As they continued toward the car, Emma walking between Daniel and Josh, she felt the warm pressure of Josh's small hand in hers, the steady security of Daniel's larger hand on her shoulder. For the first time since her mother's passing, the future didn't loom as a threatening unknown, but as a path unfolding with possibility. They were not yet officially a family in the eyes of the law. There would be more hurdles, more paperwork, more meetings with officials who would evaluate and judge and decide. But in the ways that truly mattered, in trust built day by day, in promises kept, in comfort offered freely, in belonging recognized and celebrated, they had already become what Emma had stopped believing was possible. A family. Her family. 3. Months after the courthouse victory, winter had wrapped Portland in its chilly embrace. Christmas lights twinkled in windows across the city, and a rare snowfall had dusted the streets with a glittering powder that turned everyday scenes into postcards. Inside the Anderson apartment, warmth radiated from more than just the heating system. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by red and green paper, scissors, and a tangled heap of ribbon. Josh lay on his stomach beside her, tongue protruding slightly as he concentrated on writing his name on a gift. "Tag, do you think Daddy will like it?" he asked, holding up the lumpy package they'd wrapped together. A coffee mug Emma had painted at a community art class, decorated with Josh's handprints and the words, "World's Best Dad," in Emma's careful lettering. "He'll love it," Emma assured. "Him helping secure the final piece of tape. It's from both of us." The past 3 months had brought monumental changes. Daniel had completed the foster care certification process with flying colors. Emma's school records and her mother's documentation had been reconciled thanks to Catherine's persistent legal work. Greg had made no further attempts to contact Emma, apparently taking the judge's warning to heart. Most significantly, Daniel had filed the initial paperwork to begin adoption proceedings. "Only if that's what you want," he'd assured Emma one evening after Josh was asleep. "This is your choice, and whatever you decide, you still have a home with us." Emma hadn't hesitated. "I want to be an Anderson," she'd said firmly. "I want it to be official." Now, with the adoption hearing scheduled for January, Emma felt a growing sense of permanence that still occasionally startled her with its intensity. The fear of disappearing, of being forgotten or abandoned, the constant companion of her months on the street, had faded to a distant shadow. "Emma! Josh! Time to get ready!" Daniel called from the hallway. "Melissa will be here in 30 minutes. Tonight was the winter concert at Emma's school. She had a small solo in the first-grade choir's performance of "This Little Light of Mine." Just 4 measures, but enough to simultaneously terrify and excite her. Mrs. Chen had heard her singing softly during art class and immediately recruited her for the choir, insisting that Emma's clear, sweet voice deserved to be shared. As Emma changed into her concert outfit, a green velvet dress with a white sash that she and Daniel had selected together, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The thin, hollow-eyed child who had approached Josh in the park seemed like someone from another lifetime. This Emma had healthy color in her cheeks, shining hair, and most tellingly, a light in her eyes that spoke of security and hope. The doorbell rang, announcing Melissa's arrival. Since the hearing, she had transitioned from their caseworker to their friend, joining them occasionally for movie nights or Sunday brunches. "Look at you two," Melissa exclaimed as Emma and Josh presented themselves in their concert finery. Josh was performing with his kindergarten class immediately before Emma's group. The most talented performers in Portland, without a doubt. Daniel emerged from his bedroom adjusting his tie, a rare sight that made both children giggle. "What, is it crooked?" he asked, feigning concern. "You look very handsome, Daddy," Josh assured him solemnly. The school auditorium was packed with families clutching programs and cameras. Daniel secured seats in the 5th row, perfect for viewing both performances. Emma peeked from behind the stage curtain. scanning the crowd until she spotted them, Daniel leaning forward with anticipation, Josh bouncing excitedly in his seat, Melissa smiling encouragingly when she caught Emma's eye. A family, her family, coming to watch her shine. The kindergarteners performed first, an adorable if somewhat chaotic rendition of Jingle Bells with enthusiastic hand motions. Josh executed every movement with comical precision, his serious expression drawing chuckles from the audience. When they finished, Daniel applauded with unrestrained pride. Then it was Emma's turn. As she took her place with the first-grade choir, a flutter of nervousness threatened to overwhelm her. But when the music began, something remarkable happened. The nervousness transformed into a different kind of energy, a warmth that spread from her center outward, giving strength to her voice. When her solo moment arrived, Emma looked directly at Daniel, Josh, and Melissa in the audience and sang, with all her heart, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Her voice rang clear and true, filling the auditorium with its pure, hopeful tone. Daniel's eyes glistened suspiciously in the dim light. Even Josh sat perfectly still, transfixed by his sister's voice. When the song ended, they were on their feet instantly, Daniel's enthusiastic whistling making Emma blush with pleasure as she took a small bow with the choir. "That was amazing," Josh declared as Emma joined them after the performance, flinging his arms around her waist. "You sounded like the angels in the Christmas movie." Daniel knelt to embrace her properly. "I am so incredibly proud of you," he whispered. "Your mother would be too." The mention of her mother no longer brought only pain. In this new life, Sarah Reynolds wasn't forgotten or replaced. She was honored, remembered, integrated into the fabric of Emma's expanding world. As they walked toward the parking lot, Emma spotted Zoe with her parents and waved enthusiastically. The two girls had become inseparable, with frequent playdates and shared secrets. Zoe's parents waved back warmly. They had recently invited Emma to join them for Zoe's birthday celebration at an indoor water park in January. "Hot chocolate at River Place," Daniel suggested, once they were in the car. It had become a family tradition, celebratory hot chocolate with extra whipped cream and cinnamon at the cafe overlooking the Willamette River. The cafe was decorated for the holidays, with twinkling lights reflecting off the dark river waters outside. As they settled at their favorite corner table, Emma felt a sense of rightness so profound it was almost overwhelming. This time last year, her mother had been recently gone. Greg had been sinking deeper into neglect, and the idea of a stable home had seemed an impossible dream. "Penny for your thoughts," Melissa said gently, noticing Emma's contemplative expression. Emma considered how to express the complex emotions swirling within her. "I was just thinking about before, and now how different everything is." Daniel reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Good different?" "The best different," Emma confirmed, "like waking up from a nightmare into something better than what I had before." Josh, focused on creating the perfect whipped cream mustache, looked up. "That's because we're a family now, right, Daddy?" "Right," Daniel agreed, his smile warm and certain. "We're a family." "Even though it's not official yet?" Emma couldn't help asking, the January adoption date feeling simultaneously close and distant. "Emma Reynolds, soon to be Anderson," Daniel said with mock severity. "Paperwork doesn't make a family, love does. And official or not, you belong with us." Later that night, after Josh had fallen asleep mid-story and Melissa had headed home with promises to join them for Christmas Eve dinner, Emma lingered in the living room. Daniel was arranging presents under their small tree, gifts for Josh, for Emma, for relatives who would visit in the coming days. "Can I help?" she offered, settling beside him on the floor. "Absolutely. These need name tags." He handed her a stack of colorful adhesive labels and a pen. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Emma spoke. "Daniel, when the adoption is final, can I call you Dad?" Daniel's hands stilled on the present he was arranging. He looked at her with such naked emotion that Emma momentarily feared she'd said something wrong. "I would be honored," he said finally, voice thick. But only when you're ready, there's no rush. Emma nodded, returning to her task with deliberate focus. I think I'm almost ready, maybe by January. January sounds perfect, Daniel agreed, blinking rapidly. As they finished with the presents, Emma's eye caught the framed photograph, now sitting prominently on the mantel. A professional portrait taken last month of the three of them, laughing, together on a park bench surrounded by autumn leaves. Beside it stood a smaller frame containing one of the drawings of her mother, preserved and protected behind glass. Past and present, side by side, not competing, but complementing. The following evening, Christmas Eve, brought a light snowfall that transformed the city into a winter wonderland. After dinner with Melissa and Daniel's sister's family, after carols and cookies and stories, after Josh had finally succumbed to sleep despite his determination to catch Santa in the act, Emma stood at her bedroom window, watching snowflakes dance in the glow of street lamps. Daniel appeared in her doorway with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Mind some company? Emma shook her head, accepting the warm mug gratefully. They stood together at the window, watching the snow in companionable silence. I have something for you, Daniel said finally. An early Christmas gift, something I thought you might want to have tonight. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box. Emma opened it carefully to find a delicate silver locket on a chain. It opens, Daniel prompted gently. Inside, she found a tiny photograph of her mother on one side, smiling radiantly. A picture Daniel had tracked down through Sarah's former co-workers at the bank. On the other side was a new photo of Daniel, Josh, and Emma together. So you can keep both parts of your family close to your heart, Daniel explained, always. Tears blurred Emma's vision as Daniel fastened the necklace around her neck. The locket rested against her heart, cool at first but quickly warming against her skin. Thank you, she whispered, leaning against his side, for everything. As Christmas Eve transformed into Christmas morning, as the old year prepared to give way to the new as Adoption Day drew steadily closer, Emma Reynolds, soon to be Emma Reynolds Anderson, drifted to sleep with the comforting weight of the locket against her chest and the even more comforting knowledge that she was, at long last, exactly where she belonged. In the morning, there would be presents and pancakes, laughter and perhaps a snowball fight if the weather held. Next week would bring New Year's celebrations and Zoe's birthday party. January would bring the adoption hearing and her official entry into the Anderson family. Life would continue to unfold, bringing challenges and joys she couldn't yet imagine. But, whatever came next, she would face it with the certainty that had once seemed impossible. She was loved, she was safe, she was home. On the dresser beside her bed, bathed in the soft glow of her nightlight, sat a drawing she'd made recently at school when Mrs. Chen asked the class to create portraits of joy. Emma had drawn 3 figures holding hands in front of a house, not the wishful thinking of her earlier drawing with her mother, but a reflection of her present reality. Above the figures, in careful handwriting, she'd written a single word,